Gothic 1 and 2 are one of the greatest RPG games of all time, and also the best Polish game of all time, much better than the best German game, that is Da Hexe 3 Wilde Jagd, highly overrated in my opinion. But anyway, Gothic games have absolute cult status in Poland. Every real Polish person needs to make a pilgrimage to Korinis and Valley of Mines at least every few years. And if you want to apply for Polish citizenship, you need to answer some basic questions about Gothic, like did Gomez knew about the killing of fire mages? And now the release of Gothic 1 Remake is right around the corner. And the studio responsible for it has quite a task ahead of them. And the Polish fans are already collecting torches and sharpening their pitchforks. So let's remind ourselves what was so great about the original. Number 1, the beginning. After playing some modern games recently, the return to Gothic is like a breath of fresh air. It starts with short cinematic that very briefly explains the setting and premise of the game. It is very direct and paints very clear picture. At the end of it, our protagonist lands on the other side of the magical barrier and is greeted by a hit to the face. After that we meet Diego and have our first dialogue in the game. He briefly introduces us to the factions in the Valley of Mines, gives us some useful advice and the first quest in the game to join the old camp. And that's pretty much it. From that point we are able to freely explore the world of the game and do whatever we like. And also we don't feel lost since we already have all the basic information that we need and our first optional objective. That's it. Starting a new game only takes us few minutes. Now compare that to modern games where opening sequences can last at least an hour, so that you cannot return the game on Steam. The best example of it is Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, where it takes 3 hours of mostly cutscenes and dialogues until you can finally play the game. Things like that really hurt the replayability of the games. That's why, for example, one of the most popular mods for Skyrim is the one that allows you to skip the starting sequence. And that one was not even that long. I really miss the way older games start. For example, Morrowind. You step down from a ship, go to the office, fill some papers, and you are free to go. You are not required to watch a 3-hour-long interactive movie. I think cutscenes in general are a huge problem of modern games. But that is probably a topic for a separate video. Number 2, the tutorial. Or to be more precise, the lack of it. Most modern games approach tutorials in 2 ways. First one is by using pop-out windows with text information explaining how some mechanics work. And the second one is the tutorial sequence that tells you step by step what to do, like you are some kind of idiot. The first one is much less annoying since you can just skip it without reading it. They usually don't have any useful information anyway. For example, Kingdom Come Deliverance 1 throws at you walls of text, but since some of the mechanics in that game are overly complicated, reading them leaves you even more confused than before. And the second method is some kind of joke. Usually you have some annoying character that tells you what to do step by step, throwing some unfunny jokes here and there. It often looks like this. Now, use W and S buttons on your keyboard to move forward and back. Great, you are natural at this. Now try moving your mouse up and down, left and right to look around. To continue, look in my... Great, you did it before, didn't you? And so on. To be honest, older games didn't have built-in tutorials because usually they have printed out instructions added to the box of the game. But in my opinion, good game you can figure out by yourself. My first copy of Gothic 1 came out of some magazine and didn't include an instruction. And despite the fact that Gothic 1 doesn't have very intuitive controls, the starting area is designed in such a way that allows you to figure out things by yourself in a very organic way. When you look around the starting area, you can quickly notice some items laying around that allow you to figure out how inventory mechanics work. A bit further ahead, you meet your first opponents in a form of beetles that cannot fight back, but allow you to figure out how to target your opponents, perform attacks, and also loot them. Then you go further and find your first weapon and also your first real enemy. It is a young mole rat, weaker version of the type of enemy that you will encounter later in the game quite a lot. This allows you to familiarize yourself with the combat system without dying from one hit. This little valley that the game puts you in the beginning is very small, but when you leave it, you already have some basic decent weapon and some knowledge about the combat. And at the end of it, you meet some hunters that can give you some useful advice. And also one of them is a trainer. So basically the game shows you how the level progression looks like. So the game doesn't have a tutorial, but the starting area is structured in such a way to allow the player to figure things out on his own. It is basically like the rule show not tell in literature applied to gaming. Number 3, the lack of quest markers and map. This is another element showing that Gothic 1 doesn't treat its players as an idiots. The game, despite being an open world, does not pinpoint you exactly to the place where you need to go. It doesn't have any markers, any GPS, and even map that is part of UI. Maps in the game exist, but if you want to use them, you need to first find the cartographer and then buy it or steal it. Also, it is a very expensive item in the beginning of the game. And the game is designed in such a way that you don't really need it. When you leave the starting area, you can see the walls of old camp, and in there you can find some recruiters from other factions that will lead you to other settlements in the world of the game, free of charge. And the lack of GPS and markers compensates the good old journal, where you can find all the information needed to complete the quests. It makes the game more immersive. You need to pay attention to what the characters are saying, to their daily cycle and the environment. Also, the dialogues in the game are very well written. You don't have hours of dialogues about nothing, like in many modern games. They are short, to the point, and they do not repeat the same information over and over again. Dragon Age the Veilguard, I'm looking at you. After talking to quest giver in Gothic, you don't feel lost. You know what to do. And I really like that. Gothic 1 also has perfectly done fast travel system in a form of teleportation runes. You only get access to them very late in the game, which forces you to explore the world on foot in the beginning. Can you imagine mechanics like this in modern title? The answer is no, because they treat people like idiots, and that needs to be handheld throughout the entire game. Number 4, AI. I find it really weird that currently we go through a AI revolution, but in games it basically stayed in the same place for decades. and even regressed in some areas. I really hope that in the future we will be able to speak with NPCs using our microphones and give them complex commands that they will be able to perform by themselves. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like it's going to happen anytime soon. For now, a game from 2001 has better AI than many modern titles. For example, in Gothic, animals do not mindlessly charge the player as soon as they spot you. Instead, they warn you not to get any closer with sound and body language. Some others will start sneaking towards you and charge at you as soon as they get closer. And their fighting style also differs. Some of them attack you more aggressively, and some of them are more defensive and prefer to keep some distance. NPCs in Gothic have their own daily cycles, which was quite the achievement for that time. For example, in Morrowind, that came out the same year, NPCs are very static. They usually do not move, do not sleep, do not eat. They just stand and wait for the player to show up. In Gothic, they feel much more alive. During the day, they speak to each other, work, eat, and during the night, they go back to their homes and go to sleep. If we draw our weapon in public place, all of them will react to it. First, they will warn you to put it away, and if you do not listen, they will attack you. There are some modern RPG games like Starfield where you can walk around the city with a handgun in hand, and you can even point your weapon at police officers and shoot at their feet, and they will not react to it until you actually hit them. Number 5. Character progression. This element is done perfectly in Gothic. We start the game at the very bottom of the food chain. Even some oversized chicken can be deadly opponent for us. Also, simple miner can easily kick our ass and take our ore. The first thing that happens to us in this prisoner colony is a punch to the face from some thugs, which is also a perfect allegory to being born in Poland. And later it's not much better. You get extorted by guards in Old Camp for some protection money, and in New Camp you are forced to work on a rice field every day, and if you refuse to any of those demands, the consequences are quite realistic. For example, refusing protection money, it means that others need to pay more. So you not only have problem with guards, but with other people living at the old camp. So we start the game as a nobody, and it is up to us not only to get stronger, but also to climb the social ladder. When we finally get accepted to one of the camps, we suddenly become a guard that we used to hate, and now we can bully others. And this gives you a feeling that you achieved something in the game, and not only that you have some bigger numbers in your stats and you can deal some more damage and stuff like that. Each promotion in your organization also means that you have access to better armors, which show your social status. They not only make us much stronger, but also make us feel like we are above the plebs. And there are not many games that give you the same feeling. I can only think of Kingdom Come Deliverance. Gothic also has some very interesting leveling system. Skill points that you get from gaining levels cannot be spent freely. First, you need to find a teacher that will agree to teach you, usually for some sufficient sum of money. And then this character explains to your character how to perform this action in a very immersive way. This is a very small detail, but I really like it. Also, improving your combat skills actually changes the way the character holds the weapon and his stance. and the attack animations start to look more efficient. And that is also a small detail that not many other games really have. Gothic makes you feel that your character is improving in many different ways. And many other RPG games only increase the number above your head. And number 6, open world. Many modern games have a huge problem with doing open world right. Many of them have a huge map that feels completely empty. They usually scatter some collectibles around the map, maybe some chests. They also mark all of them so that player has no problem finding them because, he's an idiot, according to developers. A good example of game like this is, of course, Assassin's Creed series. And the second problem is often an illusion of open world. Like in Witcher 3, which theoretically gives you full freedom to explore the world, but each area has enemies and quests at certain level, so the game still forces you to explore them in correct order. And some games do something completely opposite. By adjusting the difficulty to your character level, no matter where you go. And Gothic does everything right. The map is small but packed with content and full of interesting places to find. There are areas with stronger and weaker enemies, but they are designed in a very immersive way. In the very beginning of the game, one of the first characters that you meet warn you not to go into the forest, especially at night, and to avoid some old ruins, and of course the land controlled by the orcs. And those dangerous areas are not linear, they are scattered all over the map. And you can find one of them very close to the area where you start the game. So very quickly you can find enemies that are far above your league. There is no level scaling here, and the world does not adjust to you. You need to adjust to the world. Another interesting mechanic in Gothic is that the enemies do not respawn. Instead, more of them appear at the beginning of each chapter. So you cannot endlessly farm XP and reach extremely high level without pushing the story forward. Also, if we didn't clear certain area in previous chapter, in the next one it will become even more difficult. And I really wish some more games would use this mechanic. So, in summary, I hope that Gothic Remake will keep all the elements that I mentioned in this video and maybe even improve on them. But realistically speaking, this is very unlikely. Thankfully, we will always have the access to original, which is still a very playable game. It really aged like a fine wine, and many other games from that time did not age that well. For example, Morrowind, which I wouldn't recommend replaying currently. So I would highly recommend trying out Gothic if you never played it before. And if you did, it's still a good game.